بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا رب اغفر لنا ذنوبنا لقد ظلمنا أنفسنا بقصورنا وذنبنا ولا غافل للذنوب إلا أنت، فنتوجه إليك ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك ونتوكل عليك، ونشهد أن محمدا المبعوث رحمة للعالمين، فعليك نستعين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد، so we begin once again with reviewing the section of Usul al-Din from Umdat al-Muta'abidin wal-Muhtarifin, and the Umda, or the reliance, is a text which is meant to introduce some fundamental proofs that pertain to matters of belief, matters of worship, and matters of purification. And although it introduces evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, it remains to be still a foundational text. It can be made into a more advanced text by expanding the issues that it presents, by expanding the problems, and so on and so forth. I've been covering a book. It's called At-Taqrib. And in this book is written by Sheikh Ilish, and it's called At-Taqrib. I'm sorry, it's called Taqrib al-Aqaid السنية بالأدلة القرآنية, and it's like approximating the clear proofs of Aqidah by way of the evidences of the Quran, and it's operating on a similar concept. The concept that is operating from is operating on the idea of the Quran being foundational. Hold on just one second, because the camera lens is kind of unclear. I don't know if that's better or not.
Yeah, that's okay. Can you hold up the book?
Huh?
Can you hold up the book?
No, because it's in Arabic, and then it's like it's not worth it at the moment.
Okay.
And I have it in digital form as well. That's somewhere in the library. The concept is very similar, except the Sheikh Ilish, may Allah have mercy on him. Sheikh Ilish, in the book, a little extreme. Well, not a little extreme. He was actually very extreme. And that he started to say that a person that doesn't know the evidences, a person that doesn't know the system that's presented in Ashari Aqidah, that divides the attributes into that which is obligatory and that which is impossible and that which is possible, or actually, let's say, the intellectual rulings into those categories. he basically said that that person would be in the fire.
Yeah, I saw that post that you put yesterday.
He said that that person would be in the fire, and that is problematic from the angle that first the Sheikh Alish is not a small scholar. Sheikh Alish was one of the more top scholars of Al Azhar when he wrote that book. It wasn't a situation where he would just write something and it would just be um, ignored. It doesn't, this doesn't work like that. But overall, aside from that issue, he says, وَلَمَّنْ لَمْ وَمَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ بِمُسْلِمٍ وَيَخْلِدْ فِي النَّارِ. He actually went worse, and he made takfir, and he said that the person that doesn't know these things, is not a Muslim and is in the hellfire as a kafir. And what we can excuse that if we're talking about the fact that at the end he's pointing to ayat of the Quran. But still, even with all of that, that's still extreme. It's very difficult to excuse. Um, one of the things that I want to introduce here, and this was
I have a
this
question.
hold on 1 second, let me finish this thinking. Uh this was brought up by Dr. Mahmoud Al-Abidin Al-Azhari. He said that the average person, if you tell them there's two gods in the universe, Muslim, they look at you like you're crazy. There are certain points of belief that the person may gain by fitrah. And it appears that Dr. Mahmoud Al-Abidin, he's from Al-Azhar. He used some concepts also from Ibn Taymiyyah on this point. He mentioned it. He talked about the idea of al-aql al-salim wa dalil al-sahih, the sound intellect and the authentic proof. He used he in his explanation of Sheikh Alish, he talked about that, but he talked about the importance also of dalil al-fitra, the the importance of the evidence there's for the existence of Allah Ta'ala that's rooted in our nature. And so he said that the average Muslim is operating on that. And he gave the example of Fakhruddin Razi, how it was celebrated the Imam Fakhruddin Razi in Iraq had 1,000 proofs for the existence of Allah. And so they were throwing a party, his students and so on and so forth, to celebrate that. And they walked by an old woman, and one of the students got into it with the old woman supposedly, and the old one and the students were like, "Do you know who this is? This is Fakhruddin Razi, who has 1,000 proofs for the existence of Allah." So he said 1,000. She said 1,000 proofs for the existence of Allah. That means he had 1,000 doubts
Mm.
the existence of Allah. And so that got back to Imam Fakhruddin Razi, and Imam Fakhruddin Razi praised the faith of our grandmothers, and he talked about the faith of the women of that region. So one of the things that happens, how was it that she knew? She knew by her nature. She knew by fitra. And that this debate, the whole issue of awwal al-wajib, what is the first obligation on a Muslim? The way that has been handled in ilm al-kalam, the way that has been handled by the Mu'tazila, has ultimately led to takfir of the general community. No matter what we see, we can come up with as many excuses as we want. It has. And I know for sure, out of the few things that I've studied from Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab, one of the things in Usul al-Thalatha says, what awwal al-wajib is, or the first obligation is to go back to the book and the sunnah and to know who Allah is. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem with the takfir comes back, takfir meaning to declare a person to be outside of Islam. That doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries in bringing this up. We do have boundaries. But مسألة العذر بالجاهل, or the issue of being excused by ignorance, that had to definitely be something that was established. Who's excused by ignorance, who's not, that type of thing. Just like who's excused from not establishing the salah in the way that it is ordained in its normal form. There's people that are excused. Like, for instance, if you're sick, then you may be in a coma, and so the salah is not an obligation upon you in that time, because you're not conscious. Or you may have had an operation and you can only pray when you're not under the influence of painkillers, right? Because it's like the painkillers, they knock you out temporarily. It's not like some sort of long-term coma. Similar thing. Or for instance, when you're maybe you had a back surgery, so you can't stand up straight, you have to pray sitting down. There's a number of excuses that people have. So it's the same thing when it comes to belief people. Same thing when people commit acts of shirk. That's why we have to separate between the act of shirk and the person and the point of knowledge. We have to be careful, because some people, they automatically jump to the Xing the person out. And that's some of what was the contention with Sheikh Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab's teachings. There was the claim that in some of the other books that he wrote. Now, Usul al-Thalath is not a bad book, actually. But in some of the other books, there's some claims that he automatically jumped to make takfir. That goes across the board, like I mentioned. Sheikh Ilashir, al-Maliki, al-Ashari, he made a general takfir. Uh, it was more than just general. He's saying, if you don't know Aqidah in this way, with these categories of logic, then you're not a Muslim. So the problem is across the board. The problem is across the board. And that's why, as students, at whatever level we are, we always have to remember, يعني نحن في موقف الدعوة. People don't like to hear that because they want to make big of themselves, or for whatever other reason, maybe some other excusable reason. But نحن يعني دعاء let's not be called off. I said that to a brother, he got pissed. He got extremely upset. Said, what do you mean? You know what I'm saying? Say, we're in a position of dawah. We're just encouraging the people, calling them to Islam, calling ourselves to Islam. We're trying to elevate the conditions of the community. We're not here in a position to judge people as being Muslim or not Muslim. You know, that's for a judge in a judiciary system. Our goal is just to push the people into a good state of being. Got angry, or I shouldn't say angry, upset, because we want power. That's part of the dilemma. If we want power through seeking knowledge, we're gonna go straight into the hellfire. You understand what I'm saying? Because we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to make a lot of mistakes because we're seeking power in the wrong place. We should seek power from Allah, not from trying to speak for Allah or trying to have status and other. That's the wrong approach to talib ilm. Completely the wrong approach to talib. And another wrong approach to talib ilm is to think that you're going to put yourself in a position where you get some sort of status or ranking, so you can sit there and judge the people. Then there's no understanding of what talib ilm is at that point. Talib ilm is to remove ignorance from ourselves. That's the first goal. And tarfa al-jahl an nafsik wa an tarfa al-jahl an al-akharin, and to eliminate ignorance from the general community. Illiteracy with regard to what's clear foundation of the deen, and maybe that which is detailed depending on your level of talib ilm. That's standard talib ilm stuff. That's standard etiquettes, principles, rules, of seeking knowledge. Imam Zarnuji talks about that in the Ta'lim wal Ta'lim. That's a very traditional text. Uh, that's important. Sometimes the ulama, they have lapses. They have lapses. There's things that Sheikh Uthaymeen have says that Sheikh Mustafa al-Adawi has corrected him in what he said. So, في هذا the Sheikh Muhammad Ma'akhi. That's what Sheikh Mustafa al-Adawi said. And certain things that Sheikh Uthaymeen said with regard to Aqidah, and that, we call him on that. We call him on that. And that's how it is. That's the realm of knowledge, people. But unfortunately, there's this very tense approach where everybody's fighting it out. Everybody's proving one point against the other. Right now, and this is what I like about what Sheikh Mahmoud al-Abidin was saying and teaching Sheikh Alesh's book, Taqrib al-Aqa'id. السنية إلى أدلة القرآنية. He one of the things that he said was I'm sorry, بالأدلة القرآنية. I knew there was something wrong. Yeah, one of the things that he said was that, one of the reasons for teaching some of these intellectual points is to address the problem of atheism. And he was saying some incredible number. Like, I don't know how they got that number or how he got that number. I don't know how he got the number, but we're in trouble. Like, it was like some million, something like that, or more atheists in Egypt. That's just Egypt by itself. confused, atheistic, and to be honest with you, it's like to sit around and blame that on the Salafi da'wah. That's like that's whack. And this is why I tried to say to the brothers, like, leave people alone. Even if they're rude, they have issues, they have la ilaha illallah. Move to the person that is just like not believing at all. Because once that belief goes, everything else is open. I remember when I was in Egypt, right in front of Medina al Buhuth, which is where some of the students stay for free in Al Azhar. And alhamdulillah that I didn't have to stay there. But on the street, I saw people sniffing paint. That's in the Muslim world. I in the suburbs of I saw Muslims smoking weed, getting high in the car. There was they used to be very derogatory statements made about sisters when they niqab. Why? Because prostitution used to take place with the niqab covering the face. So I had brothers try to stick me up in Egypt. You know, I had brothers try to stick me up. They posed like they were the cops. I heard African brothers get killed in the over there for what I mean African brothers from other parts of Africa, not the high melanin Africans. You know, so we this is the part of the problem that we don't. What's the goal of Akida? The goal of Akida is to come into a state of pleasing Allah wa ta'ala properly and making our way to Jannah. It's not the business of philosophy. So regardless, Sheikh Ilish, he made the general takfir. Uh, he made the general takfir, and despite that, the the aside, if we can remove ourselves from that, the proofs that he brings, the proofs that he brings, for about 13 sifat are directly from the Quran, and those proofs, they the way that he tied them together, the way that he tied the ayat of the Quran together, are amazing. Are amazing. And so we take from the ulama and we reject from the ulama. There's nothing wrong with it as long as we're doing things, on a foundational level, uh, for it to be correct. There's nothing wrong with it. So the idea is that what Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi does, similar concept has been done uh by Sheikh Ilish. I thought maybe Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi uh maybe at some point maybe took from it, but the organization is not the same. The organization is not the same. But you can see that there was some movement to revive Hadith and to revive Quran, and it took form in different ways amongst the different groups, the different trajectories. Let's not call them sects, but the different trajectories of revival. Some were a little more uh forgiving when it comes to the tradition, and some were like, no, we have to purify, our stance as much as possible from over relying on the tradition. Right. So that's any questions on that before we move on?
All good.
Huh?
All good, sir.
I didn't understand.
No, I
No
said
question.
no questions, sir.
Everybody's good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I had a question earlier about the statement that Elash made
Yeah.
about certain people, they're gonna be in hell for not following a certain akida. Is telling someone, because we say that in anger, in ignorance, things like that, like, yo, I hope Allah punishes you, or I hope you go to hell. Like,
That's not allowable.
is
That's not
saying
allowable.
that the same as
That's not
making takfir on
that's
somebody?
that's not allowable, and and unfortunately that's widespread in the Muslim culture because the
Yeah,
parents do that to the children.
yeah,
The parents do that to the children.
yeah. We have in Urdu, it's like Jahannam medalo. Put him in hell. Send her to hell. Send him
Yeah,
to hell.
yeah. That
Like,
the parents think that
literally a phrase.
the parents think that they're Allah, la ilaha illallah, that they have to be obeyed like Allah is obeyed. And and we don't have to get into the technicalities of, well, is this a Muslim or not a Muslim? No, it's an erroneous stance. The obedience owed to the parents is not equal to the obedience owed to Allah. The parents are obeyed as long as there's no harm, and it's falling in line with the deen. And then there's some realms also, like there's boundaries. When a person becomes an adult, the interference of the parents at a certain level is problematic. This is a big issue, especially in the Desi community, because of what happens, especially with the in-laws and all that type of stuff. But not only the Desi communities, like I've seen that in the African American community. I've seen I've seen mothers. I'm not talking about I heard. I'm not talking about I heard from someone. I seen a mom lift her foot up. Your gender's right here. Gender's right here. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like that type of approach is extremely problematic because if the parents don't exemplify certain characteristics of mercy and compassion and forgiveness, and also if they're not on point in their deen in terms of keeping clear of certain major problems in their deen, that the children begin to associate all of that with Islam. And some will stay, some will not stay, because of that. So it's not equivalent to a takfir, but it's like basically saying I control your destiny in the hereafter. You know what I mean? Uh, that's not. I mean, it happens. I mean, we have to listen. I study with some major scholars. Major scholars. I was studying with one of the heads of Al Azhar al Sharif. Like one on one. not a class full of 200, 300. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just me and him, but it was like one-on-one from the angle I'm talking to directly. You know, it was about maybe like 15 of us, very small class. And he made a mistake one time. And he was harsh on me, very harsh. He didn't even call me, he didn't even acknowledge me by my name. He used to call me El Emrique, the American. In the way that he would say it. And he jacked me up. He jacked students up. He messed a lot of students up. May Allah forgive him.
Mm.
They sent them packing out of Egypt. Yeah. I didn't go to Egypt seeking a degree because I had a degree already. I went to Egypt seeking knowledge. And so all of that riffraff, political BS, I've seen the case of Ibrahim al-Mali. Ibrahim al-Mali came from Mali, scholar already. The racism, the blocking from him graduating. The I've seen that. I've seen that in the system. That's why brothers try to cancel me out, this, that. I'm like, what the hell are y'all talking about? What are y'all talking about? Y'all sitting over here talking nonsense. We used to sit in a room in Egypt and it was illegal for us to be in that room. We could all got locked up in the shit because it was illegal for us to sit in a place with something other than the Quran, and it's 20 of us, 30 of us stacked up in a room. This is a complete different class. Sheikh with a beard like this, and he's not Salafi. My daughter almost died in the hospital for me to be here today talking a little bit about Islam. So brothers, they talk and they have a lot to say, but they haven't really sacrificed and struggled. You understand what I'm saying? And yeah, the conditions are not great. The Muslim world, the conditions are not great. But going back to the point, like the sheikh, he made a mistake. And I knew it was a mistake.
Mhm.
I didn't sit there and throw it in his face in front of everybody. My teacher. That doesn't mean I'm accepting everything that he's saying blindly, but we have lapses. We have lapses. He's an old man. He can make a mistake. You know what I'm saying? I had a different attitude because my life wasn't depending on what he said or what he did. Some people, that's not the case. You understand what I'm saying? He says something the wrong way, he can throw him off. I remember when one of his students corrected the test, and his student, and he was doing a PhD in Maliki fiqh. He wasn't even in Maliki fiqh. He just did it in Maliki fiqh because the books were available. All the research was already done for him. He was just gonna simply. He came at me laughing. Oh, your test came back like this, like, bro, like, who are you talking to? Like, it doesn't phase me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what am I supposed to do? You know, I'm supposed to break with that. I'm not playing those types of games with people. That you hold something over my head and say, I'm here to learn. And I took the class multiple times. You know what I'm saying? And I I left at a higher level of understanding. That was my goal. We want to play the politics of education, this, that. It's very clear. I'm sitting there, it's like, you know what it's like? You're being maybe accused of being an agent because you're from the US,
Mhm.
sitting in a classroom, you know, you're sitting in an environment where people don't know if you're an agent or not an agent. They don't know how to treat you, asking you questions about the war in Iraq. I was, all kinds of stuff like that. So the lesson there, people make mistakes. We have conditions that are problematic. We have to learn how to work through them. We have to learn how to work. You understand what I'm saying? That's extremely important. And all of that to say is like, okay, Sheikh Elish in that was extreme. Do you throw out what he said on the other fronts?
No.
I mean, if it's established, workable with the knowledge, no, you don't throw it out. That's not even Ibn Taymiyyah dealt with Ibn Arabi in that way. You know what I'm saying? When you go and you look at some of the debates, even Ibn Taymiyyah with the Sufis didn't operate with them in that way. Ibn Taymiyyah was just against certain things. And I'm using that example because it's an example of clash.
Good morning.
And so that's the same thing with us. We don't, that's not how we deal with the Muslims, and that's not how we deal with knowledge. That's why it's important to master Islamic sciences. Because when you master Islamic sciences, then you're grounded and you have you kind of have I should say it in a different way, you develop the ability, the capacity to look at principles, to look at evidences, to look at arguments. What sticks, what doesn't stick, what can work, what can be bettered, what is unclear, what is, that's why it's important. Knowledge is never going to come just by associating with a group. Knowledge is not going to come by just blindly following a scholar, but the beginning of knowledge, at some point in time, we have to imitate. That's why there's a case for taqlid. Hold on just 1 second.
Okay.
Walaikum salam. Wow. MashaAllah. Mubarak alayk. Let me see your face. All right.
5 pounds, 10 ounces.
Wow, mashallah. Let me see his mom. You okay? Are you sure?
Yeah, I didn't know. No issue at all.
He should thank you for that for the rest of his life. When did he come?
Less than 2 hours ago.
Okay, mashallah.
Less now than he is.
Okay, well tell homie that I have to talk to him later because I'm in a class. Assalamu alaikum. What did you say? Just keep repeating to him, La ilaha illallah.
Okay.
All right, assalamu alaikum.
I
Jazakumullah khairan. Mubarak alayk.
Did you have a grandchild?
Yeah, I just had a grandchild.
I told you. Why you why you be holding information out on us, Sheikh?
He just came to the earth. What are you talking about?
Bro, I've been asking you for months. Like,
He
yo,
just came to the earth.
no, but I've been asking you for months. Is your daughter having a baby? Is your daughter having a baby? Because I kept
How am I gonna say if she's having a baby or not?
You
It
could've
came
said yes.
out.
Yes, she's
Having a
pregnant.
baby, Having a baby means that is an actual fact.
No, I'm saying I've been asking you a couple times, like, yo, is your daughter pregnant? Because I kept having these dreams, like, of seeing your daughter pregnant. Well, congratulations. Mabruk.
I don't even know what his name is.
Oh, that's your first grandbaby.
Yeah.
Allahu Akbar.
May Allah bless the child.
I mean, Ya Rabbi.
I mean, I'm so excited. Alhamdulillah.
So going back to that point, so that's one of the things that Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio wants. That's why he built his curriculum the way that he did, and it has a unique nature to it. He wants the student to be solid. He wants the student to be solid. That's something that should be remembered. That he wants the student to be solid. Before going back into that point, I want to read directly from the Arabic. So in the section called Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah ila usul ad-din, he says, أقول وبالله التوفيق إن الله تعالى أثبت جميع أصول الدين في القرآن العظيم، إلهياتها ونبوياتها وسمياتها. And so then Sheikh Muhammad Sharif, uh, may Allah accept from him and heal him. From what I was reading, he's not in a good state. So here he quotes from Fath al-Basair, the opening of the eyes, the giving of insight, the bestowing of understanding. You can translate that in a few different ways. It's a pamphlet. It's a pamphlet of Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi. Mostly talks about the way of the student of knowledge. It's a nice book. A little technical but nice. And we repeated it again, but I repeat this because this is a very unique point of Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi, where it shows the nature of his revival effort. It shows the nature of his reform and revival effort. And that's important, especially because sometimes African scholarship outside of ethnic Arabs and maybe even Berbers, because the Moroccans, are not all Arabs. You have someone like Sheikh Maloud al-Sariri. He's Berber. He's an amazing scholar though. And I'm not saying though because of the ethnicity point. I'm saying though because I'm just thinking about how, sometimes that whole ethnic thing comes out, and we, as an ummah, we still haven't gotten beyond that. But it shows there's revival effort in Africa itself on all fronts, not just one front. And that doesn't mean that the other part of the Muslim world that speaks Arabic, I think sometimes also we're a little harsh on the Arabs. There's reasons for that, but we have to be careful. The same thing with the Indian subcontinent. There's revival efforts. There's revival efforts that are made all across the board. You find them. So here shows that Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi is engaged in a reform and revival effort. And then he says, the reason why he says, أن فن التوحيد ينقسم أن فن التوحيد ينقسم إلى قسمين أصول الدين وعلم الكلام. So he says that the discipline of Tawheed is divided into two groupings, classifications, areas of study, usul al-din and ilm al-kalam. We mentioned this before, but I want to keep this clearly in our minds. Usul al-din. Now, the faqih comes out, meaning that the knowledge of what is the ruling of usul al-din comes to the fore. Shaykh Uthman then Fodi, as a faqih, as a person of insight, as a person of fiqh, he says, usul al-din min furudi al-ayan. Knowing the foundations of the deen, usul al-din, or the principles of the deen, right? Or the cornerstones of the deen, this knowledge is an obligation on each individual. Furud is the plural of farad. Ayan is the plural of ayn. Furud al-ayan. And ilm al-kalam min furud al-kifayah. And ilm al-kalam is from the collective obligations, meaning that it's not an obligation on each individual to know. Now, the problem is when you insert in usul al-din, like what Sheikh Alish did, some concepts that are coming from logic and expecting the people to digest it or incorporate it or comprehend it. And then if they don't comprehend it, you bring a scholarly ruling that they have issues in their Aqidah and so on and so forth. That becomes hard to obligate because those techniques of clarifying points in belief were not there in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, not there in the time of the Sahaba, not there in the time of the Tabi'in. We can stretch all we want. We can stretch what we want. We can claim what we want, but that's a reality. They were not there. That stuff was not there in the time period of the early generations. That has nothing to do with the Salafi Dawah. That's just historical facts. In the midst of the istijala, that back and forth that takes place between the different groups, we don't like to admit certain things, or we don't like to excuse certain things. And it just shows our ignorance when it comes to what we call nazariyatul ma'rifah, or the theory of knowledge, or how knowledge develops, or tarikh al-ilm, or the history of knowledge. Tarikh al-ilm, the history of knowledge. Yasir Qadi recently released a video. Part of it was solid. Some things he said can be discussed and have some issues with it, some problems. But one of the things he said is that, when the Muslims went to Syria, Syria was a place in which the Christians dominated Christian scholarship, and they had to engage in acknowledging what was going on with the Muslims and so on. I mean, with the non-Muslims, and that's where the whole debate on the attributes of Allah began. And I think it's a little deeper than that. The Muslims were encountering the Persians, they were encountering the Christians in Iraq, they were encountering the Christians in Syria. The Muslims we're e- encountering the problem of how do you communicate the deen to people that don't believe in the Quran and the Sunnah. Not everything can just be written away historically. Although, what I mean by that is not everything can be written away as that some of these things emerged because there was historical circumstances. That's true. There was historical circumstances, but you can't just write everything off like that, right? And that's the problem with the Western University, as well as its strength. Its strength is that it looks at things historically. So, oh, the origins is the problem is that it gets lost in historicism. No, the Muslims consciously uh looked at concepts from other cultures, and then they looked at how it was that they were going to deal with them, and they incorporated certain ideas in order to be able to have a common language. It wasn't just a blind following. I have to acknowledge that Usama al-Azhari, he brought up a point about logic, because the ulama, there was heavy, intense debates. If you looked at the pamphlet that I gave between Ibn Salah and Imam Ibn Salah and Imam Izzuddin Abdul Salam, there was a major fighting, which shows that the whole school of so-called Tafweed and the school of Ta'wil within the Ashari circle was not necessarily, it was not necessarily always on equal terms. Izzuddin Abdul Salam, in that pamphlet that we have in our archive, was very harsh with Ibn Salah, very harsh with Ibn Salah, and I love both of them. I love both of them, but it's, he was overly harsh, and part of it was because there was a discussion on what should we bring into the public and what should we not bring into the public. So it's necessary to know that the scholars didn't follow blindly. Ibn Salah was against logic, the study of logic and the study of theoretical ilm al-kalam. He was a scholar of hadith, amazing scholar of hadith with his own uh, scholarly methodology and rationale. Is right. He had his own way of dealing with knowledge. And that's part of the dilemma, that we have different ways of dealing with knowledge. Ibn Taymiyyah was trying to get back to that way of dealing with knowledge, where everything is not dominated by having to refer back to Greek logic or to refer back to logic. But some of the ulama, they say, listen, the logic that was borrowed from the Greeks was not borrowed blindly. The scholars, they filtered it, they put it through a process. And so that does create a civilizational shift. It does create a civilizational shift, that you have these ideas that enter into the knowledge circle of the Muslims, and then what do you do with it? It's like, for instance, the way that a TV comes into your space. How do you work with that TV that comes into your space? Like, what does that TV do in your life? It can bring educational programs, it could bring you information, or it could bring you corruption as well. It's a tool, and that's the same thing that the logic did. So when we talk about ilm and kalam, regardless of whether we like it or not, there's going to be some need among the scholars to engage. The whole question really is, what is it that the people should be given access to and not given access to? if we're just repeating the same arguments that never come to an end in the past, and what we call perennial arguments, that creates confusion in Aqidah. And that's why we have to go back to Usul al-Din and issues of Iman. We have to clarify the term, say, well, this is clear in the Deen. This is foundational in the Deen, right? This is where we start, this is where this is, the realm of the scholars to engage in debate. That's important. That's part of revival and reform. Parting is reviving the Deen, what's clear in the Deen, and reforming our thinking. Because if not, what happens is it just becomes the issue of a clash. You trust me, people, when you go to the higher levels of knowledge, you're gonna need every tool possible. Things are way too complicated to just be so closed. I give you an example, like for a long time, Saudi Arabia had avoided organizing their legal system in the same way that the other Muslim countries had, which the other Muslim countries went into the organization of their legal system similar to what was going on in Europe and other places. Yeah. The situations of the world forced that. So after a while, they asked the Egyptians for some help in that regard. The Syrians for a long time were teaching science and math and all that in the Arabic language, and they advanced pretty far. But they were forced to teach in English at a certain point because their students that were graduating in Syria, in order to have access to, if they were going to stay doctors in Syria is one thing, but in order to, continue to have access, they had to come across English. And so these are civilizational problems. That's just the reality of the situation. Civilizational problems. In some places, there's no need to talk about the relationship between the Muslims and the people of the book or the Buddhists or whatever, because those people don't, there's no interaction. And in some places there is. The same thing with atheism and this, that. So those types of problems come up in outside of Usul Din. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, whether the Salafis like it or not, was a scholar of Kalam. That doesn't mean I'm promoting Kalam. But in the realm of scholarship, it has its place. So then he says, فَمَعْنَى فُرُوضِ الْعَيَانِ هي كل علوم أو عمل التي وجبت على كل مكلف أن تعرف وتعمل بها. I'm sorry, أن تعرف وتعمل بها. He says, in the meaning of فروض الأيان, فروض الأيان, فروض is the plural of fard, الأيان is the plural of عين, fard al-ain. The meaning of fard al-ain is all of that knowledge or action, what comes under that category of fard al-ain, in other words, or individual obligation. Every knowledge or action that is made obligatory on each individual that's a mukallaf, that's responsible in the deen, that reaches the age of responsibility to know and to act according to it. أما فروض الكفاية فهي العلوم والأعمال التي إذا قام بها بعض المكلفين يكفي لسائرهم. Whereas in the case of furud al-kifaya, or the collective obligations, this is or they are all of that knowledge and action that falls under the category of I'm trying to see if I can, how can I make it a smooth translation. It, it falls under the category of knowledge that if some of the Muslims that reached the age of responsibility, if they establish what it is that is obligated, or if they learn what it is that's necessitated, then the rest of the ummah is not considered responsible for establishing that or for knowing that, which falls under the realm of collective obligations. فعلم أصول الدين أهم العلوم على المكلف. So the knowledge of the usul of the deen, or the principles of the deen, is of the most important branches of knowledge on the individual to know and يعلم ويفهم, and to comprehend. لأن مدار لأن مداره هو الإيمان والتصديق بالقلب, because the centering piece, or the axis of this type of knowledge, is iman, and it is conviction of the heart. وفي الحقيقة إن التمييز بين المؤمنين الكامل والمسلمين العاصين والمنافقين والكفار الصريح هو في إيمانهم وتصديقهم وفهمهم لأصول الدين. And he says that even the ability to differentiate between a believer, a complete believer, and a believer that is a sinner or is deficient, or the munafiq, or the person that is a clear non-believer, uh, this in their iman and in their conviction and in their understanding is from the usul of the deen. فالكفار الصريح, so the clear believers يكفرون بوجود الله ويشركوا به شيئا في عبادتهم, ويكفروا بالأنبياء وبعضهم, ويكفروا ببعض أو بجميع ما جاء بهم من السمعيات. And then it says, like, what's clear disbelief is the disbelief in the existence of God, or to set up partners of worship with the worship of Allah, or not to believe in the prophets, or to disbelieve in some of them, or to disbelieve in everything that they came with regard to the knowledge of the unseen. And the munafiqun, أنهم يعلموا بظواهر أمور الدين. So the munafiqun, they're known with regard to the external practices of the deen. I'm sorry. فالمنافقون أنهم يعملوا بظواهر أمور الدين. So the munafiqun, they're known. I don't know why I keep saying that. The munafiqun, they act on the external aspects of the deen, such as the salah, was zakat, وغيرهما, and other than these. لكنهم في سرائرهم, but even though they establish the zakat, I mean, even though they establish the salah, they establish the zakat, and other than these pillars, right? Uh, internally, in their inner recesses, or the inner recesses of the heart, it doesn't say that literally, but it points to that. They disbelieve in some or all of the usul of the deen. Okay. That's important, because sometimes we talk about hypocrisy, but we don't distinguish the hypocrisy is of types. This type of hypocrisy equates kufr. The only difference between this and openly saying kafir is that the kafir openly does not practice the deen. Right? The kafir does not openly to practice the deen.
So isn't hypocrisy worse than kufr?
Well, because there's a lack of sincerity. It's being in between. Externally, you're manifesting the deen, but you're internally, uh, you're not with the deen.
So I mean, I think that's where a lot of our youth are at.
No, a lot of our youth are not there. That's harsh. A lot of our youth are not there. Our youth are struggling. This is different. This is intentionally. That's why is intentionally. Firstly, we live in environments where the only one that would do that it would be some sort of agent that will intentionally be among us, trying to practice, pretending to practice, but not be with it, because nobody's forcing you to practice here in our community. So the ones that may be associating with the Muslims, but then confused, but then doing something else internally, that's because there's confusion or there's struggles. The idea of munafiq and the idea of munafiq, it, it doesn't add up. The idea of munafiq, there really was kind of like in Medina where the Muslims had dominance. And so because they had dominance, it was difficult for someone to what? It was difficult for someone to deviate um from what it was that was expected of the Muslims. Because it was difficult to deviate because the Muslims had dominance of the environment, uh, then people will pretend to be part, but they're not really part. That's not what the youth are doing.
Right.
Maybe in the household a little bit, but you know, maybe in the household a little bit, but not really. They're struggling. That's why it's important. These things,
Struggling doesn't mean you're a hypocrite.
but there's what we call nifaq al-amali. And
Mm-hmm.
Salafis, in the Salafi conceptualization, they did a better job at clarifying that. Nifaq al-amali is where Nifaq al-amali is where we have actions of hypocrisy, but in our hearts we still believe. In Nifaq al-kufri, or the uh the nifaq that we classify as disbelief, like we're talking here, is when in your heart you're not down with the deen at all. But externally you're what?
Going through the motions.
On through the motion. So a lot of us, we have nifaq al-amali.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're not practicing what we preach, so to speak. But we believe, like it's not like we're not calling on Allah. You know what I'm saying? We just have some issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. That's why also dividing the Muslims into just believers, dividing people into believers and disbelievers is very dangerous because there's levels. There's levels of belief, and even when it comes to even the issue of disbelief, okay, someone may not fulfill the conditions of tawheed because they have shirk, but does that person believe that there's something called God? They
Mm-hmm.
believe something called.
Yeah.
Even in that instance, Ibn Taymiyyah would say that person is closer than the straight materialist atheist. You know, that's something that is important to comprehend. Uh, and in the hadith of Mu'adh bin Jabal, forget about Ibn Taymiyyah. The hadith of Mu'adh bin Jabal, which is sound Bukhari Muslim, so it's a higher degree. It's not mutawatir, but it's high up there, right under mutawatir. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells Mu'adh, "You're going to a people that believes," but then he tells them, call them to Tawheed. We miss out on that sometimes in the Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu amanu. In the Quran, it says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu amanu. The ayat was addressed to the people of the book. All you who believe, believe. Believe, the second belief means the second call to believe. I mean, or the second word that addresses belief, let's put it that way to be more clear. I'm sorry, because I didn't have breakfast. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Here is a call to believe. All you believe, all you who believe. The command that comes after us. Amanu. The first is what we call nida. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Right? All you who believe is a description. It's a call to a people, but is also describing them. Oh, you who believe. The O is the call. Oh, you who believe. Amanu. The second one, the second part, when the ayah says Amanu, is a command to believe. Some of the ulama that tafsir, they say these were the people of the book. So when the command comes to believe, to have iman, is to correct their belief so that the tawheed is something. Because we also have this whole thing, like, when Akida issues come up, it becomes really sensitive. We had this spat, and this was coming from the Salafis, that if you didn't make takfir on the disbelievers, you were a kafir.
Mm-hmm. Alhamdulillah.
Come on, that's like, that's like, why are you widening the door to kufr, to takfir? Why are you opening up the opportunities of takfir? Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid, he attempted to close the door a little bit in Faisal Tafriqa, in the boundaries of theological tolerance. That's why also, and this is a problem that the Athari have to deal with, and the Salafis to a certain extent. One of the stronger points in Ilm al-Kalam, methodologically speaking, is that when you look at the proofs of what is accepted in Aqidah, or what the proofs that are referred to as foundational for Aqidah, when it comes to the Ahadith, and the ayat of the Quran, they have to be qat'i. Qat'i means that they have to be of the highest degree of soundness. With the Quran, that's not a discussion. But when it comes to hadith, it has to be the highest degree of soundness. And it has to be mutawatir. That's a massive debate in Aqidah issues at the higher level. Just leave it. Let's leave out the reason point for a second, because they talk about it has to be, they talk about it has to be qat'i, the scholars have been qat'i meaning provide certainty some. And they say, like, for instance, whatchamacallit, that the reasoning has to be, reasoning, we differ on reasoning. So that we will always get to the level of certainty and reasoning, that's debatable, but that's why I said leave that to the side. One of the things, are we clear on what I'm saying, or what I'm saying is confused?
That a hadith needs to be qata'i, which is kind of like precise.
Not kind of. Clean up your language. It has to be mutawatir.
Qata'i and mutawatir meaning that there's several, that there's numerous chains of transmission,
Yes, that's
which
the
is
definite. That's going back to defining the mutawatir. But the type of knowledge that it gives you is certain knowledge. It's qat'i.
qata'i is like clear
We,
cut.
we have to review this stuff. But what that does is, if you say that if a person is not a kafir unless they go against these things, qat'i proofs. That does is it closes the door. It closes, or it narrows the scope of who can be considered a kafir. Because if you add on the other ahadith, then it opens the door to a person being, it opens the person to being a kafir. Now, um, we can come back to this discussion because it needs some clarification. But how the Salafis control that is they say, well, we have to follow a process of takfir. We can't just make takfir of a person automatically. That's how they saved themselves. But for Ghazali, that was not sufficient. Because Ghazali in his time period, he was like, yo, everybody's just like against each other. Each group is against the other group. So in order to settle this, we have to what? We have to close the door, narrow it down. So we have to say that there's just some really basic criteria. There's some basic criteria that is in place, and this is was basic in order for you to be a Muslim. This is the most foundational stuff that you have to know, that you have to believe in to be a Muslim. He left it at that, Imam Afzal. That's the only thing that I would say that, you know, the Athari, in my limited knowledge, that from what I've looked at, heard from the scholars, that the Salafis and the Atharis would have to contend with that issue. But under the concept of an udhr bi jahl, excused by ignorance, the process of takfir closes the door. It closes the door. Because of the difference between the takfir al-am and the takfir al-mu'ayyan, a general takfir and a specific takfir is differentiated. So making takfir of an individual person is not that easy. You have to go through a whole process. Now, you can call out a specific action, specific word, right? But again, to me, I find it to be problematic that we're at that point. I find it to be problematic that we're at that point because we're in a position of da'wah. So when it comes to education, the language is different versus that we're in a judiciary system. So in the language of education, that would look like um, these are things that can possibly lead to kufr. We have to be careful. You know what I'm saying? That's education in da'wah. And the language of judgment becomes, you know, this is kufr, and the person who does this is a kafir. That you don't even. How about if somebody's doing that?
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
automatically put it over their neck that they're kafir.
Yeah. Or a
So the thing about it is that the process, the language is what we have to work on. We have to work on the language of cultivating the people and dealing with them. And I don't think that we have a clear example in the time period of the Sahaba that was always taking place like that. It was like kind of more of an encouragement, of an encouragement. In Hayatul Sahaba, there's a section on individual da'wah.
So where does the buck stop if a hadith is?
Hold on a second. In Hayatul Sahaba, the book Hayatul Sahaba, there's a section where it shows the Sahaba doing da'wah with evidences. And so you see how they're talking to the people. You see how they're engaging with the people. It doesn't mean that we eliminate the boundaries. It's like, how do we reach the people? So Sheikh we spent a lot of time on this today, and I apologize. But Sheikh Uthman then Fodi on this point is there's a reason why he's doing this. Because he was struggling with the Muslims mixing the deen with other religions. So he had to clarify how was he going to deal with the people. On top of that, he had to eliminate things which would not facilitate uh, the learning and the practice of the deen. And I'm sorry, Ali. Yeah,
Okay.
he says on page 7, go to page 7. No, I'm sorry, go to page 6 really fast again at the top. He says, I have composed it in order to explain what Allah Ta'ala says in his book. He says, I have composed it in order to explain what Allah Ta'ala says in his book and what his messenger says in his sunnah concerning the science of usul al-din. And then we talked about this before. This classification that he has is extremely important. The sciences of the outward and the sciences of the inward. And usul al-din, everyone should know that. All of us here studying should know, and then Fodio classifies knowledge in that way, which is pretty much grounded in Hadith Jibril. But that classification, and huwa taqsim farid, there's a lot of benefit in it. And then he says, I have not included in it the legal extraction of the scholars. What's detailed, what's the ijtihadat of the scholars is not there. And then he says, Abdul Wahab al-Sharani. Abdul Wahab al-Sharani, Sheikh Uthman bin Fodi pointed out to me, because Sharani, some of my teachers used to talk about Abdul Wahab al-Sharani is not given enough attention on as a Sufi reformer, because he had some Sufi reformist tendencies. But he says he mentioned in the Dura al-Manthura fi Zubad al-Ulum al-Mashhura, verily Allah has made all of his servants responsible only for what is explicitly established by the Sharia. That's important, people, because nobody's following that right now. All of us who claim we're teaching, we're preaching, we're not following that. With that level of sensitivity for the people, what they need. And you find sometimes Sheikh Uthman Danfodio writes, he says, and this is sufficient. I have written this is sufficient to know at this level. That's pedagogy. That's knowing how to teach. That's teaching methodology. That's good dawah strategy. Not to just, in the circle of students of knowledge, you can go into depth, but in order to be mutqin, to be precise and exacting and scholarly, we have to be able to draw these lines, because the average person is not going to be able to draw these lines. Drawing these lines is the role of the scholar, right? And the strong student of knowledge. So keep that in mind, that verily Allah has made all of his servants responsible only for what is explicitly established in the Sharia. What is meant here is that the pious worshiper and the adab believer should act according to what is explicitly related in the Quran and the Sunnah, and not by what is legally extracted from it. Shaykh Uthman Danfodi here is calling to the delete. He's calling to know what it is that the Quran and the Sunnah say. It's a different technique than the Salafi approach, but it's not too far off. Because he's not being a traditional class, meaning that he's not just going up against with everything in the tradition. But he is saying that there's some teaching, reformation and teaching that has to take place. And part of it is knowing the degrees of knowledge and what people are responsible for. What is meant here is the adept, is that the pious worshiper, the adept believer, should act according to what is explicitly related in the book and the Sunnah, what is clear from it, and not by what is legally extracted from it. And we can go into more of that issue. The desired knowledge in the above is that which Allah Ta'ala has made explicitly law. This is the knowledge for which the servant will be questioned uh, about in the hereafter. With all of that, there is no harm in it, and it is not difficult for anyone to obtain. The issue of ease, facility, in obtaining this knowledge, one is not in need of spending one's whole lifetime. We mentioned this before, but we have to keep mentioning this as in the next page. Until we, until we what? Until we internalize this among ourselves, right?
Mhm.
In obtaining this knowledge, one is not in need of spending one's whole lifetime, nor to overcome obstacles. This is because its meaning basically entails performing certain actions and avoiding certain things. Clear.
Right.
That does not stop the common people from understanding it. Contrary, 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 right? To what has been prescribed by the mujtahidun from among the imams. In reality, no one will be questioning hereafter about what they have prescribed, along with the fact that in what they have laid down there is difficulty and harm. One is in need of an entire lifetime and to overcome many obstacles in obtaining this knowledge, as is well known. That's the dilemma in Aqidah studies. That's the dilemma in studying madhabi fiqh. I'm saying that because I've dealt with it. I'm not saying that as a critic. I'm saying that as a person that has experienced that hardship. We will lose the people like that. I'm not saying we throw it out. It's not, but in Azhar, we don't confuse the pathway of the scholars and the students with what we're teaching the people. We don't confuse those two. Know the audience. Know the audience. Don't just put things out there because it's what's scholarly and this. No, no, no. I mean, sometimes it's done. We do it, all of us. But when we start teaching the people, we have to know. Here in this setting is different because people already proven their commitment. They come in week after week. We've been covering this section now for weeks. You see what I'm saying? So people are committed, but the average person is not necessarily going to be committed. After 5 minutes, they drop off. 10 minutes, they drop off. For goodness sake, they can't even have patience with a TikTok video that is above a minute.
Yeah.
So that's important to understand. Is important to understand also why it is that he makes it very clear to separate usul al-din from ilm al-kalam. That's a big problem for us to overcome in presenting the idea because the scholars make it synonymous. It's not synonymous. They make it synonymous to facilitate understanding, but it's not synonymous. Usul al-din and ilm al-kalam are not synonymous. They overlap, but they don't mean exactly the same thing because ilm al-kalam encompasses way much more than what usul al-din, the foundations of the deen, encompass. Ilm al-kalam takes on a whole bunch of other topics, and people need to know that the knowledge of it of Islam overall can handle that because people go to the university and see they start to see what comes from uh they start to see what comes from the professors, and then they listen to the YouTube clips or Facebook and YouTube reels, and then they're like, wow, the professor's just like on another level. Look at how these imams are talking. These imams don't have no. There's another level of knowledge, but that has its time and its place and its people and its criteria, right? So that's something that is I want everyone to uh explain this section in writing, in your own words, send it into the group. This section here is for me, is key because it clarifies the rest of it. And remember the principle that we talked about today. So just because a scholar makes a mistake doesn't mean you throw everything out. But we have to be careful with the people in general. That's the number one thing. We don't live in the Muslim world. Um, we've had people leave the deen, and then we've had brothers go back and encourage them. They come back to the deen. I remember one brother was weekly talking about Islam. I, I'll leave his name out. He became famous, and then on public he left Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I'll mention his name because it's public knowledge. Omar Lee. Omar Lee was in between all this group stuff, and one time he broke and he left Islam. And the brothers didn't. May Allah bless them. They didn't
Hold
throw
on.
him fresh. They what they did was they reached out to him and they encouraged him. So that that's something that we have to recognize. Does anybody have anything else?
I'm sorry. So you want us to summarize what we've been covering for the past few weeks?
No, just this section here. If you want to, I want you to utilize what you have been learning to explain this section in your own words.
What section would you call this? Because it
This is just
doesn't.
this is just page 6 and 7.
Okay, page 6 instead. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and especially put focus on the issue that I mentioned from Fath al-Basair, which is Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio's other book. And I think it's translated as well, Fath al-Basair. So in reality, that gives us coverage of 2 books. Studying from 2 books here.
Did you
And
you
especially make note of this point that Sheikh Sharani said. Sheikh Sharani said, verily Allah has made all of his servants responsible only for what is explicitly established in the Sharia. That needs some clarification, but I think just knowing that with time it'll become more and more clear.
So in our own words, summarize page 6 and 7. And you
The
mentioned
top part, you can draw from the notes. You can draw from the recording. And also define what is usul al-din and the ruling for it. And actually, no, you have to include part 8 as well. But part 8, the note, no, just the whole section actually, because he translates Fath al-Basair.
so page 1 through 7.
No, 6 through 8.
Okay.
6 through 8.
So summarize pages 6 through 8 in your own
Yeah.
words. Also,
And be ready to talk about it next week. Everyone will get their chance to explain it. Put it in the group as a note. That way everybody will know. Next week, everybody be ready to comment and give their portion of the class and explain this section. 6 through 8. Is that clear or no? The recording that'll be shared is last week's record, this week's recording. That's fine. Let's stick with this week's report. Because it's more focused.
Yeah, that's why I didn't send out last week, because it was more of a side discussion. So
Does anybody,
summarize.
does any, I'll write it. I'll write it then, so if it's too confusing, I'll write it. I'll send it to the group. Or you got it. Do you have it or no?
I just sent it if you want to look at it.
Okay.
And
Well,
then Brother Hanif and Abdurrahman, how you guys doing?
I'm good. I was just enjoying and reflecting on what Sheikh Yusuf was saying, and ever since I've been introduced to the Sheikh and then Fodi Alhamdulillahi Barakatuhu, I mean, 2 years ago, I've always really enjoyed his teachings. I think that like what Sheikh Yusuf was saying about how the pedagogical way that he expressed how to teach and the manhaj that he how to go about teaching the layman high level sciences or high level aspect of the sciences
yes.
and religion is very interesting to me. And it's very beneficial for me personally, where you kind of feel like not forget it, but you have confidence in your religion because you have a firm understanding. I understand the yakin part. Like even when he gives you a touch of the kalam, like using the the type of terms that are he explains them with the Quran and the Sunnah. So he kind of like I think it's a beneficial methodology that he developed. And I think it's a testament to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him much tawfiq and hijri educationally. While I remember you asked about how nowadays the scholarship aspect can be lost because they focus so much on personality. But when we look at academic, like what you're doing with us, I think it just shows the real genius behind the way he expressed and taught his head. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think it's very impressive.
May Allah accept from him and make dua for him, inshallah.
I mean,
May Allah make dua for him and that we benefit in this world. I mean, may Allah accept from him in our dua, and may we benefit from him from his knowledge in this world and the year after, and may he benefit as well.
I mean,
But he has special quality. He's the only person that I've known in scholarship. There may be others. I just don't know them if they exist. But he's the only one that I've seen in recent times that has gone through the whole life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in actuality. In actuality. What I mean by that is Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio went through almost every stage in the seerah in life with his people and established the culture like the Prophet established Medina. It was Ajib, made hijrah, and at the end also showed that he wasn't looking for power. He retreated, went back to teaching Nevada when everything was established. You all know that, right? You
yeah,
know
you
that about his
mentioned
life?
that.
Yes.
Huh?
Alienated son and his brother. They split it. One got the west, one got the east, and he was alive when it happened. They didn't inherit it because death. He stepped down. He stepped down and went back to teaching.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you show me somebody that builds something and is ready to hand it off.
Nobody.
You know, it's
Even his followers can't do it. When they
They get
build Jamaat,
powerful.
they can't hand it off.
we,
Mashallah.
we you know, we have to separate between the Jama'ah of Sheikh Uthman and Fodio and the teachings because
Yes.
if we don't do that, you know, what happens is that people try to commit you that you have to be part of the Jama'ah. No, you don't have to be part of the Jama'ah. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that to be against any group or anything like that. It's just that Sheikh Uthman and Fodio teaching also belong to the Ummah. It's not. And like I mentioned before, I've been criticized about this point. I say, listen, my ancestors in the Caribbean, Some of them could have been from Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio's Jamaat. We had Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio's Jamaat come all through the Caribbean. In the past, in the time where the Jamaat was suffering. Now I'm not talking about recent times. I'm talking about, hundreds of years ago. And we found his works. We found his works in Jamaica and different places like that. We know that his people established stuff in Brazil. That we know that there was rebellions in the Caribbean. Even it's possible that Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio's Jamaat reached uh, this part of the Americas. So a lot of us, we have tie into uh, Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio by spiritual legacy or by ancestry. You know what I'm saying? Where it's not like this whole concept of making it exclusive. That's fine, but that's something special from Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio that others don't have. That type of that type of connection with the Americas. You don't see any scholar really having that type of connection with the Americas. Period. You understand what I'm saying? His people have a direct connection to the Americas, and I agree with Sheikh Muhammad Sharif on that. You know, it's something that is deep, is deep. There's no doubt about that. But his teaching style, that has to be paid attention to overall. And Abdurrahman, do you have anything to say before we go?
No, it's all okay. I'm really learning a lot. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. I just think that if we can have access to even the side discussions, because I find them very, beneficial as well. And sometimes I want to take notes after. So we'll also have the recordings of that as well. It's really very great.
Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna start to put them up now.
Yeah,
And
I'll
make sure
send
that
them.
they're very more focused. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have it. I have the one from last week and I have the one from this week. Inshallah, I'll forward that to you today.
Okay, inshallah. And can you label this one as one? Title it and label it as title it Reliance, session 1.
Session 1. Okay.
All right. Okay, may Allah accept from us and forgive
Uh,
us our
And can we make dua for your grandson real quick?
Go ahead.
I
I'm gonna make the dua, or are you gonna make the dua?
Somebody make the dua. I don't know. Okay, Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Ya Allah, have mercy upon Sheikh Yusuf and his family. Please raise his grandson to be a pious and strong Muslim. Please grant him good health, strong iman. Please give him knowledge of the deen. Please help him to be raised in Islam. Please bless his parents and also protect them from any harm. Have mercy upon all of our loved ones and give us all a good end. Ameen. Sorry, I'm not a pro
Amen.
at this. But just
May Allah make him a blessing to you and to the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ameen. And let us know what the name is, inshallah.
Yeah, I don't know yet. I have to figure that out. I think there's going through the process. Yeah, my daughter didn't. I was thinking about her because she did a natural birth with no chemicals, no nothing,
Hmm.
no drugs.
At home or in the hospital?
No, they had it was in the hospital, but she had a special program that she was doing.
Mm.
But that takes a toll out of you.
Yeah. She's a soldier.
Allah facilitate, inshallah.
I mean, I'm excited.
Inshallah. Okay, inshallah, let's regroup.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.